woman to inspire a generation of women to play football.
Since 1895?
Yeah, 1895. Yeah.
When is football then? Return of the June Festival of War, it's not as 21. Bigger.
This is a lovely extract from a woman's game.
I'll have to get my silly glasses.
You're probably going to heard of what it is player you're probably going to do it in Dubai. They've actually not. It's not my invention. It's presence that has come out of it. Topic is
Yeah,
stop to think about it. But then you realise, yeah, it is so.
Yeah.
So having said that, I hope you don't mind if we come back to it.
Fly down to Dubai.
Well,
If we must.
someone has to do it, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I mean, just for instance, in the Chaplaincy meeting,
As a passionate football fan myself, I've always been fascinated by the sport and the role that it plays within society. The connection between identity politics in various forms and football is strong in both the past and present. Today, in a world which identities are multiple, being a football fan is one identity of several, and belonging to one of many communities and individual is part of it. The aim of its exhibition is to further the understanding of the role which football plays in contemporary society in relation to religion, identity, and community. Before I give the floor to Kevin Joseph Coleman, who will be the chairman of today's panel discussion, I also would like to announce the arrival of a small, can I call it a booklet, on the history of the Institute, since we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Institute this year. You will find copies outside the room after the panel discussion. So over to Kevin. Kevin has worked for over 20 years in sport, and most of this in diversity and inclusion. In that time, he has worked for the Lawn Tennis Association, Kick It Out, the FA, and last but definitely not least, the Brentford Football Club. So I think we should welcome the panel and the chair, Kevin, with a round of applause.
And first of all, I want to say a big thank you to Leif, Essen and Ed for all the hard work they put in to put this exhibition together, and thank you for allowing us to be in this wonderful building today. Faith and football are subjects that are close to all of our hearts. It's a very complex, nuanced and complex relationship, we say in D&I. Faith and football are sometimes distant cousins, sometimes close siblings. And to bring that nuance and complexity to life, we've got a really diverse and experienced panel to give you some of their insights and their experiences to bring to life some of that context. So first of all, I'd like to ask the panel individually just to introduce themselves in 10-20 seconds, your role and your experience of football and faith. Let's start with Zaf.
Thank you, Kevin. So my name's Zafar Iqbal. I'm a consultant in sports and exercise medicine. Been working in football for the last 17 years. Currently the head of sports medicine. My 8th season at Crystal Palace. Previously, similar role for 5 seasons at Liverpool and 3 seasons at Tottenham before that. In terms of my experience of faith, certainly in football, all I can say they've been very positive. I've never hidden the fact that I'm a Muslim. All my players, all my staff know that I'm Muslim, and I've been able to share many experiences with them. So for example, at the training ground, they've been very accommodating in terms of providing halal food for the players, providing prayer rooms, and also the opportunity for me to get out some of the functions I don't want to attend, like the Christmas parties and stuff, because of the alcohol.
Matt.
Thank you. Matt Baker. I work for Sports Chaplaincy UK. I'm Pastoral Sport Director in English football and National Director for England, which means I oversee chaplaincy throughout English sport. As a ballpark figure, we've got about 650 chaplains throughout UK sport, but specifically I'm very involved in football. I've also been chaplain at Charlton Athletic. I know I'm sitting next to someone at Crystal Palace, but it's down the road from us, but chaplain at Charlton Athletic for the last 22 years as well. Faith has always been part of my life. In fact, I was thinking through it today on the way in, that I was about 8 years old, having been brought up in a Christian family, but as an 8-year-old I remember saying a little prayer and taking on faith for myself as a Christian. And coincidentally, that was about the time I started kicking the ball around in the playground as well. So faith and football seem to have been intertwined all the way through from primary school age right up to today.
Thank you. And now the person without whom the exhibition couldn't happen, Ed.
I'm Ed Merlin Murray, an artist, illustrator and animator, and I'm here in the capacity of all 3 of those roles. My relationship with football is a tricky one. As an autistic boy, team sports were an absolute mystery to me, and tricky time at school. I've gone on to have a football-loving son, and through that discovered the real beauty of the game and a real love and passion for watching it. In terms of faith, again, I'm potentially a strange choice for this role as an atheist, but I would describe myself as a spiritual atheist.
Thank you. And now the glamour guest. But for those of you old enough to remember, Linvoy Primus.
I like the way you said that. That's good.
Introduce yourself.
Thank you. Glamour. I don't know. Well, you got it right. Anyway, so I'm Linvoy Primus. I suppose my faith and football journey is football. I used to play professionally for 17, 18 years. Started at Charlton, funnily enough, not when Matt was there. Matt wasn't quite old enough to be there then. Started at Charlton and then ended up finishing at Portsmouth. At Portsmouth is where my faith really came to life, and I think the only way to describe it was that I thought football was going to give me everything. I thought it was going to give me the perfect life, and I realised through my wife's illness and some other things that there was more to life than sport, than football. So I started to go to church, and after about 6 weeks, I heard the message of Jesus, I heard the message of faith, and I realised that faith was a person and not something that was a bit abstract. So how that affected me in the football world was football became something that I knew that I could do rather than somebody. Football wasn't the person that I was, it was something that I'd done, and I had more gifts than that, and one of those gifts I felt was to help other people. So the natural thing to do was start a charity in Portsmouth called Faith and Football, and it was just an easy way for the local church to engage with the community. Just get that football out, and you draw people to that, and through that we were able to serve the local community. So that's my journey of faith and football.
Thank you. And you don't realise how confusing that's been for football because of the amount of groups that are called faith and football around the country. So the way we're going to run this panel is we've got a couple of questions here that we thought would be nice to kick off, and then we'll open it up to the floor and any questions you've got. So have a think. Any burning questions, anything you've always wondered about, whether it be around faith, professional football, grassroots football, and then Ask Away. So first of all, I want to ask Linvoy and Ed around faith and football and the perception of faith and football. So the professional game in this country has had a bit of a reputation, especially in the 80s and the 90s, and for many faiths it's felt like a no-go area. Do you feel that image still pervades, or is the societal image of football changing?
Yeah, do you want me to start? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's definitely an acceptance, but I think that's the world's point of view. I think the world is more accepting now, but I just think with dressing rooms, I think more players are comfortable talking about their faith or living their faith out because it's part of them. They realise that it's not a Sunday morning or it's not a Tuesday night away, it's part of everyday life. So there's more acceptance, but there's still stigma. You know, I think if a high profile player who had a bad reputation in the past came out and said that they'd come to faith, I still think it wouldn't be taken in the right way. But I think players who I've met who have been strong in their faith and been able to continue on, it's been because they've got, you know, a strong understanding of their own identity, and that's why they're able to talk about their faith in the dressing room, or even receive a bit of stick about their faith, but they know that the reality is that you know, that's what they believe, that's who they are, and so there is a change, definitely.
Ed, as someone who works outside of football, what was your perception of the game?
So my perception of the game has grown and changed a lot through the process of working on this for the last 3 or 4 months. As someone from the world of art and illustration, there's no stigma about faith really within that world. It's easily integrated in lots of different ways by lots of different people. What I've actually found through working with the interviewees on football and religion is that there are so many diverse faiths, and which are integrated into the game in such a nice way by a whole range of people, which I have found surprising, and I would say probably further forward than I would have expected.
Yeah, I think from my personal point of view, especially working at Kick It Out, there were lots of stories of, for example, in Bradford, Bangladeshi and Asian communities who live around the stadium who would never venture in because of the stories of alcoholism and violence that they'd seen on the news. And I think that the openness of a lot of players of faith has changed, you know, especially people like Mo Salah, who's been so successful and so adored, has changed people's perception of the game, and people feel like it's more accessible. I think that's the key. And now moving on to two people who work in the game, you are people who are openly of faith. How were you accepted within your roles within the game?
Well, I find with that whole growth in terms of faith being more accepted now, we have loads of conversations up and down the country. We've got nearly 70 clubs with chaplains there, of the 92 now. So there's a real openness to the role of the chaplain. Now, lots of us are involved pastorally caring for people, but the spiritual dimension as well is really appreciated. And so over the last 10 years particularly, you know, it's now on the agenda at Premier League meetings that I go to, where faith is discussed and how we're meeting the needs of players who have a faith. So we don't find a kickback in that sense, but much more an embracing of what the role's about and what faith is about, whatever faith that may be.
Zaf?
Again, all I can say has been very positive. Lots of conversations. I mean, the examples that I can give, every club that I've been at, the managers, whenever a new Muslim player has come in, knowing that I'm Muslim as well, they've approached me and seen how they can help that player fit in better. When we had a Muslim player come in at Crystal Palace, Alan Pardew was the manager at the time, and as soon as the player came in, knew he was Muslim, and he actually came to my office and said, look, could he get an idiot's guide to Islam? So he actually wanted to read about it to try and see how he could try and help the player. Sam Allardyce, I remember having a conversation with Sam Allardyce, and he put it aptly that, look, if you look after your workforce, they'll look after you. And so again, everywhere I've been at, they've tried to accommodate for all faiths. At Liverpool, Brendan Rodgers, we used to have players, Cole Torre, who used to go and pray in a part of the training ground. Brendan found out, and so organised for one of the rooms to be changed into a multiplayer faith room. Similarly, with regards to food, which is obviously an issue for many players who would not eat at the canteen. Again, the clubs have been accommodating, made sure there were halal options, so that it works twofold. One, that the players are making sure they're getting the right kind of food, but also with their teammates as well. So all I can say from within the game, actually working behind the scenes, it's all been positive. I've not had any negative experiences.
Yeah, and I'd say that's been evidenced from what I've seen. I think across the 4 divisions there's probably over 100 Muslim players. Most Premier League clubs have halal food. Anwar Uddin over there, who works for the FSA, has done an audit of clubs up and down the country and how they cater for fans of faith and how inclusive clubs are. So I think the perception, especially the pro game, has actually been turned on its head, even down to the iftar breaks that we had in matches during last season. I've got a question now for Ed. Football in the past was something that was confined to the back pages. It was for burly blokes who talked about it in pubs. Now football is on the front page and the back page, and it seems to be talked about more in the creative sectors. It felt to me, anyway, that the artistic quarter was maybe a little bit reticent to dabble in faith, whether it's faith in football or faith generally. Is that the case, and has people's views changed? Are artists more braver to tackle these subjects?
I think it's the role of the artist in general a lot of time to tackle questions which are potentially difficult and delicate. And I see a lot of artists working today who wouldn't shy away from questions of faith. What I found in working on this is that there wasn't any need for any kind of delicacy from me, because the stories of faith and football from the interviewees that we spoke to were so brilliantly positive. There was no way to really go wrong in the portrayal of that.
Okay, thanks. I've got a question now for Linvoy. This is something that I think that probably touched on my work, because I work generally in the past mostly on the grassroots game, and I think faith communities have been using football as a way of re-engaging young people. I think with young generations growing up have lots of distractions, and I think lots of faith leaders, there's lots of examples of imam leagues, for example, where people have tried to re-engage young people into places of worship and faith through football. Do you think that faiths are using this enough? Could this be an opportunity for faiths to re-engage young people, both spiritually and in terms of their well-being and health?
Yeah, I wouldn't know if there's enough, only because on the ground you only know your sort of area. Yeah. But I think that after COVID and everything like that, we all realised that exercise has to be part of our diet, really. There's no getting away from it. And if there's something to hold on to, and it's sport and it's football, then I'm sure there's congregations, people in the congregations who would love to volunteer some time to be able to help these young people. And sometimes it's just having a safe place, a safe space. And if the ball's there, that they can run around and kick it and whatever else, and that's going to help them feel safe, then that's great. But I just think there's a lot of talk about money and lack of money, and I think churches, haven't got lots and lots of money, but there's space available to put things on, like with football or sport generally. But I just think it works both ways. You're investing in young people, giving them role models, but you're also helping them to understand about keeping fit, that this has to be part of your life as well. So if there's not enough churches doing it, then there should be. If there are a lot of churches doing it, then great. But I just think it's just people and time and volunteering.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's historical precedent for that as well. Back in Victorian times, there was something called muscular Christianity, and what was going on there is that there were well-meaning reverends, churches, seeing that there were these youngsters on the street who were nothing better to do, so they formed football clubs for them to then do something. Southampton is one that springs to mind. They play at St Mary's, the church. They're right in the parish now.
And both Everton and Liverpool, which are clubs which were formed from church teams originally.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot there. So quite a history of that.
Yeah.
Going way back.
Now I've got a question for all of you, and it's a broader one. I think football has been used in the past sometimes as a antidote for some of society's ills. So you can go back and think of the British and German soldiers playing on Christmas Day, or where Kick It Out formed a project in Palestine to get Israeli and Palestinian children playing football together. Do you think football could be used more potently to try and solve some of society's ills? Because it does seem to have a power where other interventions don't seem to work, and it's a very natural and cheap thing that people can deliver. Let's ask Limboy.
I can't believe you said this way. It's probably best if I share a little story. So we started a faith and football group in Birmingham. Darren Moore, who's Sheffield Wednesday manager now, started this football group there, and one of the volunteers was from Uganda. And he'd been brought to England, adopted, and grew up, had a tough life growing up, ended up in prison. But anyway, he's come out of prison and he's helping Faith and Football up in Birmingham, and he decides that he wants to go back and find his roots in Uganda. So he goes back to Uganda, and it turns out that his family, he's the only one left from his family, and the land that they own in Uganda is on the conflict zone of Sudan, Uganda and DR Congo, I think. That's a conflict zone. So he went there and thinking, well, what am I going to do? And he thought, well, why don't I do a football tournament? So we organised a tournament from the UK. It's difficult, by the way, so don't get into it. But we organised it in the UK. He organised this tournament, and all these tribes who would normally be fighting were playing football together. And off the back of that, they started to bring humanitarian things in to do testing for things like that. So a story of somebody in Birmingham who didn't know where their future was, goes to a country, finds out he owns all this land. What can I do? I use sport to try and unite. Now, I don't know if it stops all the fighting out there, but what I do know for this moment in time, I think it's for 7 days, no fighting. And the tribes that are playing against each other, they were warned by the referee, no fighting, leave everything there. You play on the pitch, no fighting. So there is a way, and I could tell you about basketball stories like that, and hockey stories. So yeah, I've seen it happen in real life. So thanks for asking me first.
Thank you. Zaf?
Yeah, look, for me, we can see from the diverse audience here, football's a great leveller. It doesn't matter what background that you come back. I think there's two things that people from around the world can share and have in common. One is food, and the other one's sport. Both of what I'm passionate about and what I can speak with the footballers about all day. Look, there's lots of things. I think the key thing is that it allows education and raising awareness. So you mentioned some of the footballers, Mo Salah, Sadio Mane. What is given an opportunity is for other people. And, there's been programs about Muslims in football, and it's just raised awareness. And people have been, would I say tolerant, but more understanding, as I would say. Also accepting that, different players, different faiths may have different needs. So you mentioned with regards to the iftar break, which was last year, and I was actually fortunate to be there, and it was one of our players who was actually fasting. It was the first game for a while where the iftar break was during the middle of the game. So I asked the opposition doctor if it was okay if we had an iftar break, just like they have a drinks break, and he said not a problem. I quickly called the Premier League, they said not a problem. Spoke with the referee, he said again not a problem. So at the appropriate time I just told the fourth ref, he told the referee on the pitch, he blew his whistle, and nobody within the stadium actually knew what was happening apart from the players. So the goalkeeper just held onto the ball. One of our players and one of their players ran to the side, had a drink, and had a date, and then straight back on the pitch. Nobody knew. It was only afterwards when Wesley Fofana tweeted about it, and I purposely kept it quiet because, one, I just didn't want anyone to sabotage it, and then afterwards, when people, you'd always get some people start complaining and say, oh, this is ridiculous, next they're going to start praying in the corner and all that rubbish, and I'm like, well, you didn't even notice that it actually happened, you know, so how can you complain about it? It's saying when the weather is hot, you have a drinks break, and now thankfully they're saying that, well, whenever there is an iftar break in a game, it'll be offered to the team. And as I said, not a single player from either side has complained about it, no managers complain about it, and so I think certainly within football it allows to raise awareness, and not just from faith but various things. So you mentioned in terms of healthy lifestyles. So again, one of my other passions is trying to raise awareness regarding healthy lifestyles in schools. And if I could just share a quick story, when I was at Tottenham Hotspur, I went into school, started a health project, and the teacher said, yes, that was okay, but next time could you bring a footballer, because the kids weren't that engaged. So the following week I brought a footballer, and he did about 20 kick-ups, and he just got them all hooked. The guy couldn't even string a sentence together. There's me, 6 years at medical school, trying to change their lifestyle in terms of eating healthily and right kinds of foods. But a footballer comes in, kicks a ball, and they said, brilliant. So if you can't beat them, join them. So whatever I try and do now is that whenever I have an idea, stick it at the back with a footballer, and it'll get far more awareness. And the same with recently a DFID project. So we started that, and again we did that separately, didn't get any traction. Did that with football, and thankfully as a result of raising awareness this year, well, as of next year, the government's going to make it mandatory for all schools to have DFIBs, and that a large part of that is because of raising awareness through football, the Oliver King Foundation, again through football. So I think it's a great vehicle to raise awareness on a wide variety of issues.
Thanks.
Should we pass it after the ball and you can do some PPR?
It wasn't me, it was a footballer.
Matt?
Yeah, a project that I'm very proud of that we've been involved with at Charlton in terms of raising awareness. Football's not going to solve social ills, but I think it can make us aware and stop and think. It actually started with Alan Pardew was as manager, with a spate of teenage murders that were going on in London. We set up a project called Street Violence Ruins Lives Initiative, and part of that project was to have a game every year where we'd make people stop and think and raise the profile of that. And I remember one particular game we decided would be Charlton against Millwall. Somebody's laughed over there. Hopefully that was laughing at Millwall, not Charlton. Packed stadium. Very sadly, there was a couple who were on the committee with me at Charlton who'd had a son who'd been murdered, and also from the Millwall perspective. And what we decided to do, we got permission from the league to take off the sponsors and actually have the Street Violence Ruins Lives written across both teams' shirts. And then before the game, the parents of the boys who'd been murdered left their own end, went to the middle, laid wreaths, swapped shirts, and walked up to the other end. Now, the rivalry that you get between Charlton and Millwall being local, but you could have had a pin drop when that happened. You'd like to think that sent out a message and just made people think, carrying guns, carrying knives is not clever. What can we do about this? So that's just one example, but I think we can raise these as issues of awareness to make people think and maybe change behaviour as a result.
Thanks. And Ed, from someone outside of football, what's your view?
Interesting there, Matt said football's not going to solve social ills, but I think that it is going to help to solve social ills.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be football. You know, if I was in charge, it would be drawing. But actually, getting a load of teenage kids to sit down and do drawing is impossible. They don't care. They will get together and play football. And as a parent of teenagers, I've seen how that will change their lives for the much better. If that could then potentially lead them on to some kind of introduction or experience of faith, then that would be even better. But yeah, absolutely, just football for all kids is a real force for good. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think there's lots of examples of, for example, at Wembley and across lots of clubs, there's the Open Iftar. Some of you might have attended, where bringing together 400 to 500 people, Muslims and non-Muslims, to break fast during Ramzan. That's happened at Wembley Stadium, at several professional football clubs. And in Wembley, the Corner League was something that brought young men together who might have been fighting post-Code wars previously, bringing them together through football. And I think that helped to bring a lot of people together and avoid a lot of violence. My final question before I open it up. We were due to have two more guests, Yasmin and Karishma, today. But on the back of the Lionesses' victory, and on the back of women's football, women and girls football being the third biggest team sport in this country, I think there's lots of communities where women and girls have taken up football, possibly on the back of the Lionesses' success, and their interest in football has possibly been more accepted and a little bit easier for them. Have you seen any examples of successes of women and girls getting into football who are from cultural communities, from communities where it isn't a normal thing for women and girls to play football, and football has been that difference that's helped them break into this new sport? Let's ask Matt.
I was going to adopt this to Linvoy because I know Linvoy's daughter plays. Okay, the Lionesses has only just happened, but lots more young girls are talking about football now and wanting to join clubs. They're the conversations that I'm hearing. We've got better investment in the professional game for women's football at long last, because historically, I'm not pretending to be a historical buff, but to mention it again, the way that women's football has been treated in this country has been appalling historically. 100 years ago, it was as big as the men's football.
For those who don't know, women's football was banned by the FA in 1820 for 50 years. 1920 for 50 years. And you're right, at that time, women's football was gaining some over 100,000 spectators.
Yeah, it was as big as men's football at the time. So there's catch-up going on. So I think now with the Lionesses and more professional women's teams as well. I know for us from a chaplaincy perspective, we've now got 17 women's teams with chaplains as well. So you've got the whole faith element going on there as well. So I think we're going to see, a real spike in the coming seasons of girls getting involved at grassroots level, and then that working up through the game.
Yeah, and an interesting stat is that in primary schools, both boys and girls, around 80 to 90% of boys and girls play football regularly. But when you graduate to secondary schools, the girls' number drops by half and the boys' number stays the same. So hopefully with the success of the Lionesses, it might encourage more girls to keep on playing the game, make it more acceptable.
Yeah.
Linvoy.
Yeah. So, as Matt said, my daughter plays. So I've got 3 children, so all play. So my eldest son's 28, and he plays locally. My daughter, Atlanta, she's 25. And she plays for London City Lionesses, based in Dartford, but she also plays for Jamaica, and she's in South Korea now. They've got a game over there, and they qualified for the World Cup in Australia next July, so I'm going to Australia next year. Oh yeah, thanks. And my youngest son, who's just turned 20, he plays as well. So we've had football as a family, me playing and the children for, I'm now 48, so over 30 years really. But what I've seen happen in the women's games through my daughter has been it's been amazing. Look, what's happened in the last 4 years, it would never happen in football. The men's side of it, only in the women's side in terms of acceleration of what's coming through. And I think what's been good as well, I think the FA have made a rule that if you have a women's team, they've got to be connected with the men's team. It's not independent. So even there, you're just seeing a joining together now. So it is the future is bright, but my daughter had to go to America to do a scholarship, so there's a gap. There's still a gap of between 18 and 23, 24, where we can really make like headway education-wise, and still continuing in sport. But she had to go and she's come back. But we knew the path that she was going to take had to be different. It wasn't the pathway where you go through the academy, you get into a first team. We knew it had to be a bit diverted, but we're prepared for that. And I think the other side of it for the women's game is a support. I think there still needs to be support, a lot more support, because the women's side of the game still needs to be understood. There's a lot of men making decisions, there's a lot of women making decisions, but I think there's still a lot of understanding psychologically and physically that has to come, but it will come, definitely.
Yeah, you're right about youth football. I mean, youth football or soccer, as they call it in America, is massively
It's
developed,
huge.
but it drops off when you get into adult level. But women's football here, for example, UEFA have a rule where any men's team playing in the Champions League has to have a professional women's team, which has nudged a few clubs who are a little bit obstinate. The Women's Super League has been massive. The FA and the Premier League in their defence have put a lot of investment into this area. So women's football has been the biggest growing sport for a long, long time. But adding that professional level on the Lionesses, I think will change the perception and make it much more acceptable and hopefully less of a drop off in high school.
And I think as well, there's a pathway. I think that's people, you know, as a parent, I can see a bit of a pathway, but I also understand that that pathway also needs another skill next to it, because it's financially the women's game still a way behind that you can live a life. You know, we still support our daughter, 25 years. We're still supporting her in some ways because financially she cannot live her own life. But
and realistically, football, you know, there are over 12 million people involved in football in this country, and only a small percentage of players. There are coaches, referees, volunteers, people that work at professional clubs in all sorts of areas, media. And you can make a living in football and be involved in it without having to be, you know, the best player in the world. So now I'd like to open it out to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for anyone?
The emphasis of the discussion has been football welcoming faith. And I'd like to flip it over and talk about faith welcoming football or not.
I think it's a question that's come up a lot, not just around gender equality, but around other areas of inclusion. And I think it's quite a delicate one. I think it's one where you try and enhance the power of football. So in the countries you want to go to where you want to influence some change, not dictating, you know, Western values, but almost you want to influence change. And I think it's quite a soft one. I think it's for example, the Qatar World Cup that's coming up. I think there'll be people going to that World Cup expecting it to be a certain way, and the culture will be very different. And I think that will be probably a learning exercise both ways. I think there will be football fans who will go over there and realise it's not just about behaving a certain way that people have done in the past. You know, they have to be a little bit more. They have to behave themselves more. But on the other hand, there are certain values which they'll expect, which may not be present in that country, where it might change the attitude of local people. I think it's a slow. I don't think you can almost go over and dictate through football. I think it's one of influence, especially using stars. I think when stars lead by example through their own influence, that has a bigger impact than us trying to tell people to change. And I think that the reasons for the two females not being on the panel is they simply, one of them is in another place and one was supposed to be here but just isn't here.
Look, Kev, let's just address what the lady said over there about South Asian inclusion. Let's be honest, let's not mince our words. The Football Association is not doing anywhere near enough for British South Asians in football. I just want to get that out of the way because you mentioned it earlier. This question I think we're going to kick off with Linvoy. He seems to be the go-to guy. I'm a little bit annoyed that you didn't mention Barnet there. You mentioned your professional career.
Barnet.
I had no idea you were Atlanta Primus' father. I never even made the connection. And you did touch upon women's football earlier and the success of the Lionesses. So I wanted to ask you, Linvoy, what did you make of the fact that England started with an all-white lineup for every single match of the Euros, and obviously stunning triumph. We hope it's going to inspire the nation. The girls themselves are wonderful role models, but what did you make of the fact that, and I suppose I'd like to open that up to all of the panel, the fact that there was an all-white England line-up for each of the 6 games, and also you touched upon support in the women's game. What does support look like to you as someone from a diverse ethnic background, and for your daughter being also from a diverse ethnic background?
Yeah, it's really good. God, didn't know that one was coming. All right, so yeah, my first thoughts with seeing the England, the women's team, it didn't cross my mind. It didn't cross my mind straight away. It's probably a few games in, and you think to yourself, well, there could be 1 or 2 changes here. The manager has, from the outside, the manager has 11, and that's great. She has to win something. She doesn't have to play the political game. She knows she's got to put the best 11 out. But I think as time goes on, as we've seen with the men's team, there's going to be more more black players coming through, and will be good enough to start. There won't be, a second. People won't have to look twice about that. But I also think with the women's game, the progression that's been made as quickly as it has with England. And the teams that are, if you look at the teams that are supporting the England team, they're mostly the teams that play in the Champions League. And then after that, you've got to say, well, who else plays in the Champions League? If your best players playing for England playing in the Champions League, you've got to select them. But I think it will change. People are aware. You've made me aware. Everybody in the room's aware. It will change, without a doubt. Support. What that looks like for me is that, when Atlanta was brought into the England setup as a 15-year-old, it was really good. We thought everything was in place, which was lovely. But then you realise there was some other things like. With her well-being, with her understanding of the players around her, there was things that weren't in place at the time that needed to be put in place, which are again coming down the track. They are being looked after and being looked after well. But I think the all-round looking after is that I don't understand the women's game fully. I know it from the outside, but I know that there are a lot of players around my daughter's age who have got things going on in their lives that are far bigger than football, far wider than football, and they just need somebody on the ground that they can speak to outside of football. And that's where Matt comes in with Chaplaincy, that they need. And there are a lot of young women, there's probably a lot of young men, and I do work with a lot of young professional men as well, but there's a lot of young women who are going through things that don't know who to speak to, and that's a support that will come and it will get bigger. But that's what I'm looking at, because you can play football all day, but your life mentally, physically, your life is quite short, and that needs to be taken care of, because when football finishes, your life continues. So hopefully, those things will be addressed going forward, and I'm sure they will, but it's just time. It's just time and money, as they say.
Zaf?
Yeah, look, like yourself, I didn't notice. I just noticed 11 players on the pitch, to be honest. I was fortunate to. My first job was actually with the FA, with the England. They were under 15s, under 17s at the time, and 3 of those players were part of that squad. And when I look back at it now that you've mentioned, I think probably almost all the players were white. I personally believe it was because of the fact that those were the players that they selected that they felt best at that time. I think again it comes down to, people are talking about, let's look at the other side, there's not enough, why isn't there a Muslim female player playing for the England team? Well, for me, there's not enough playing at the grassroots level and building up and then into the lower leagues, and then only then can you then expect them to be playing at the England level. So for me it's about time, it's about numbers. Just as you mentioned before, previously in the men's game there weren't enough, excuse me if I'm using the wrong term, black players.
That's right, that's fine.
Yeah, previously there wasn't enough, and now we've seen that at the grassroots level that's increased in terms of participation, and then the best filter through. And I think it's just a matter of time, but there's got to be more participation at the grassroots level. That's where it's got to start. Otherwise it's too big a jump. You can't just expect suddenly a player to be representing at the highest level unless there are thousands that are playing at the lowest level. And you look at the actual figures every year, I think out of the millions that are playing under the age of 16 in organised football, only about 180 actually make a career in professional football at the highest level. So the numbers are very, 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 very small. So if you take that into account, so that's millions of players, only 180 make it. So likewise, if you're expecting an Asian or a black female player to be making it, there's got to be thousands playing at the lower levels for that to then filter through. So for me, it's about numbers, it's about time, and again, creating those opportunities to allow people and make it easier for them to play.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you need to turn it on its head. Only around 1 in 20,000 players becomes professional. So although the national teams and the Premier League are the shop window, where if you do see that diversity, representation of communities really positive, you need to look at the 10 million people playing. And if you look at the Asian communities that make up 8% of the population, Black Afro-Caribbean around 4%, and if you think that our subject today is faith and football, the majority of those Asian communities are going to be Sikh, Hindu or Muslim, then you've got a lot of underrepresentation of faith as well.
You are a high-profile footballer, very nice one too. Have you experienced any covert racism in the dressing room, on the pitch, or from the audience? Thank you.
Well, that's good. I suppose because of my age and reflecting and just knowing what the world looks like today, there was definitely racial slurs made, but in a way that were very flattering. So even though it could be deemed as that's not very tasteful, actually it was a way of saying something about you, about your nature and things like that. So definitely happened, but I wasn't shy in saying things the other way that would cut the same way. So in the dressing room, this is the thing we understand, Matt and I, when you walk into the dressing room or a football club, Andy will understand that as well, it's brutal. You'll go in for one day and you'll come out and you think, what have I just walked into or what have I come out of? So you have to be, give as hard as you're given, that's given to you. But there was definitely racial things said, but we were teammates. If it was us, we were teammates. We're going to work together on the pitch, so it wasn't personal. Was there other things said to make people feel small? Yes. About their skin colour and things like that, yes. But again, in that time, 15, 20 years ago, it was just what you spoke about you just spoke about it. But today, it would never ever be allowed. But yeah, you learn from that, and it's only looking back that I realise some of the things that were said that wasn't good.
You handled it very well, actually.
Well, I think you're called a professional. Yeah. So, if somebody spits on you when you go to pick the ball up, or somebody's shouting abuse at you, you have to be professional. But inside, you don't want to be professional. You don't. Yeah. But you have to be professional, and those are the moments. Yeah.
And football's done a lot in recent years to try and educate, hasn't it, within clubs? I mean, you were involved in that with Kick It Out. But up and down the country, historically, the word banter gets used a lot, and banter would often trip over into bullying or to racism or all kinds of stuff. Now, there's been lots of education into that, raising questions there up and down the country at professional level, particularly as to what is that really about. So it's a much better environment than it was 20 years ago. It's not cracked. I'm not suggesting it is. There are still issues there, but it's a lot better than it was.
Yeah, banter, I think,
a few years back was almost code for inappropriate behaviour. But Zaf works in a club right now.
Yeah, look, I think there's two ways to look at it. If we talk about within the club, I think anybody who made anybody else feel uncomfortable, whether it be as a result of their faith, their beliefs, their colour, they would be jumped on immediately now. I don't think there is a place for it, certainly within the workforce. You know, we all get educated on a regular basis within the club, from outside the club by the FA, and I think anybody who passed it off as banter would be jumped on. If any of my colleagues said anything, you know, they'd immediately get a warning and be told in no uncertain terms. And even within the players themselves, I've had players who've come to me and sort of like said, you know, was such a thing said inappropriate? You know, there's a lot more awareness and understanding. Outside the workforce, that's a different question altogether. If you're talking about in terms of the crowd, in terms of the audience, it happens. That society, you just have to walk down the street and you'll see it. So I think it's a bit unfair to put that all on football, because we've got to just look at what society happens and how even the politicians pass off as banter. You know, we're talking about the leaders of this country talking about people being pillar boxes and making jokes like that, passing it off as banter. So let's get it straight. This is a society problem. If we're talking about racism, if we're talking about issues with regards to faith, it's an issue with society, and I don't think football alone can solve that.
Yeah, I think the litmus test is, so, you know, 10 to 12 million people play football, a lot more people watch it. If there is discrimination and racism of any kind of exclusion in society, it's going to happen in football. I think the litmus test for football is whether it's better in football than in society. Football can almost lead the way. You know, if players, coaches, fans really behave themselves and use themselves as role models, it could then influence, especially young people growing up. You know, if a player dives on a Saturday or Sunday, all the kids the next day will be diving on pitches all around the country. If a player really behaves himself and talks about his faith or her faith, then you'll see young people doing the same thing. So I think it's an opportunity for football to almost lead society, rather than in the past. In some ways it was probably a little bit behind.
I want to go to events and I see it's predominantly white based and six packs. It's very intimidating. So if there's no representation of even a South Asian person or even a black person, then I'm most likely not to go. So what would you like to see done more, even if it's something like having more presence on social media of players that are in the faith and speaking up about it and saying, you know, talking about what got them through the game because of their faith, etc. Would it mean that they have to speak up more? Do you think that would make a difference?
I think the ways...
And that goes to everyone, really.
Yeah, look, I think what's got to happen is that within communities, rather than look at what the FA can do, it's really about the communities themselves, where it's felt that we want an opportunity. Look, to play football, you just need an area, put down your coats as goalposts, and you can play football. So it's getting like-minded people together who can play. So when I started out playing football, not only in school, but I used to play in the South Asian League at Hackney Marshes. There's always be a few people who would require, you know, who would put a lot more effort in making it easier for other people. So, you know, the FA can help with some guidance, but I think it comes down to the individual communities and see what can they provide and put on. I look at in North London, and there's so many Turkish clubs within the Turkish community who are setting up football for their own community. So I think it's the same for other communities, and up and down the country. I think there are people who have gone the extra yard themselves to make it easier for other people, have set up community football schemes. So I think that's what's got to happen. I don't know how the FA is going to specifically going to change that, because you've got to have people, if that's what they want, nothing's stopping anybody from playing football, from setting up a club. There's got to be the interest there, and those people have got to come together to play.
I'll reply to you. I think that's right to an extent. I think that football is quite a complex industry.
You know, if you look at other industries, there's a little bit of logic to the way it's set up, but football's grown organically. And you've got the Premier League, the PFA, the FA, the Football Foundation. And I think what needs to happen is all of them need to embed inclusion into everything they do, whether it's funding for pitches, whether it's their comms, whether it's the funding they put into development. They need to put as much money into women and girls development as boys and men's development. And then over time, you know, women and girls football is a big sport. It's the third biggest participation sport. But as you go further up the ladder, the perception is probably that that isn't the case. So I think the more they need to embed it rather than do tokenistic things but not embed it. But I guess that will take time because it's a very big sport. There are a lot of football clubs, most football clubs now have a community trust arm to them as well. There is some tokenism in there, but some that are serious about it, I think we will see investing in these areas off the back of what we've seen in the summer. And I think we will into girls' football and right down at grassroots and across different... The community, every professional club has a community trust, and I would say the majority of the really good community work happens through the trust, not the professional club. But the professional club is where all the money is and where that you see on TV. So I think if the professional club buys into what the community trusts are doing, then you will see massive change. Community trusts are where it's really happening. The amount of investment that's been taken away from sport in schools over the last probably 20 years has had a massive impact. You know, most people, Anwar's here, Anwar was picked up and by West Ham from school. You know, probably one of the last players for that to happen. And I think the underfunding of sport in schools, it's now usually when there's a teacher who's got a hobby of sport rather than part of their role, is probably one of the biggest factors. I think outreach from the professional game could be better. You know, I think some clubs do it really naturally if they're in very diverse areas. Some clubs it's becoming more difficult. But I think there's a bigger emphasis on that now from the Premier League and all the people funding the game. But it's such a huge game, it's going to take time for that to bear fruit. And I think we've run out of time. So I want to say thank you to the panel. And a big thank you again to Leif, Essen and Ed for putting on this exhibition and for inviting us here today.